For Esther, for a while, it was her treehouse. Now, her treehouse is a real tangible thing. It stands there. But when she thinks of the treehouse often, she goes to the thoughts about it before it was standing there. And she remembers coming on this 40-acre property. And Jerry and Esther were walking around, and a lot of it is big oak trees, and a lot of it is cedar trees, and a lot of it is just a lot of brush. And so they were making their way around it, sort of trying to decide, it's a big piece of property, where do we want a light? And there was one particular place that was sort of a little green pasture, and Jerry had said to Esther, "Ooh, this place feels so good." And so they thought that would be the place that they would start to build their buildings. And one day after the building was built, Jerry said to Esther, "Let's ask Abraham why we built the building here and why this place felt so good." He said, "Was it because there were happy people that lived here before and we could feel them, so we just wanted to put our buildings where they had been?" Because the property looked undeveloped, and it was. And when he asked us that question, we said, "No, you were the happy people you were feeling. You were dreaming into your future. You were sensing what was to be, but you didn't have the ability to know you were looking forward. So you assumed you were looking back. You assumed that there must be something back there that I was picking up on." So when Esther thinks about the treehouse, you would like it if you could see it. It's 3 stories, and there's a switchback. Esther was going to climb a rope ladder, and Jerry talked her out of it and built some switchbacks. He said, "I can see you on the rope ladder. I just can't see you with your computer and you're on the ladder." And so they stepped into this ring of trees. There were 6 of them in this particular rather small ring of trees. And Jerry said, "This would be a wonderful place for a treehouse." And Esther had always wanted a treehouse, thought she was too old to care about a treehouse. And now Jerry is dreaming about a treehouse, and as Esther stood there, she could feel the treehouse. And she said, "How far into the trees would it be?" And Jerry would say, "Way up there." And Esther said, "How far?" And Jerry said, "Well, let's go get a ladder and we'll climb up in the tree, and then you can get a look of it from in the tree." And so he got the tallest ladder that he could find. They put it on the top of the car, drove it over with both of them putting their hands on and put the ladder up in the tree. And Esther climbed the ladder, and she thought she was so far up in the tree. Now, when she's standing in the treehouse, she looks down to where the top of that ladder was. But it felt so far up. And then they began dreaming about it. Esther said, "What will it be like?" And Jerry said, "What do you want it to be like?" And Esther said, "I want it to be really tall." And Jerry said, "Well, how tall do you want it to be?" And Esther said, "As far up as we can make it." And Jerry said, "Do you want to nail it to the trees?" And Esther said, "No, let's not nail it to any of the trees. Let's make it a free-standing structure." And Jerry said, "Then we'll need some big poles in the ground." And Esther said, "How will we put the poles in the ground?" And Jerry said, "We'll need to get some cranes. We'll need a crane and some really long poles." And so Esther is imagining really long poles, and she's imagining a crane putting the really long poles into the ground. And then she's imagining the poles being, so there were 6 big poles put into the ground, 40 feet tall. And then they built the bottom floor. And then Jerry said, "Now what do you want? And now what do you want? And now what do you want?" So they just dreamed it into being. And it is the dreaming of that treehouse into being that rings Esther's bells, not the actual structure standing there now. She remembers the feeling of something that wasn't there, but she could feel it as if it was. That's what we're talking about. And think what was attached to that, a feeling of whimsy. There was no practical purpose in the whole world for this. This was not an office building. This was not a studio. This was not a place that served any practical purpose. This was not something that Esther and Jerry were doing for any other reason other than it felt really fun to think about it, about a treehouse, a playhouse. Are you getting what we're talking about? And so for years, ever since then, that treehouse was erected in 1996 or 1997. That's about the time that they were beginning the process of it. And all of those years, when Esther thinks about the treehouse, you know where she goes? To the dream of the treehouse, to the dream of it when it was pure, when it was clear, when there was no resistance whatsoever around it. Are you getting the idea? And so what was the purpose of the treehouse? What purpose does the treehouse serve? Can you think of what purpose it might serve?
To light you up.
To dream. To dream. One day, Jerry and Esther were in Asheville, North Carolina, and they were staying in their bus, and there was a family staying in a bus next door. And Jerry, especially Jerry, because he was out where they were, he got talking to them and got to know them and really liked them, and they really liked him. And they came into the bus. They liked to see the bus. The bus was a really beautiful bus. And then they were homeschooling, and he gave them the Sarah books, which are part of this work. It's a fictional story about all these truths, about a giant owl on Thacker's Trail, and about a treehouse. And so he gave the books to the children, and a few months later he got a letter from the family that they were coming through the San Antonio area and they would like to come to see the treehouse. And Esther and Jerry said, yes, we would be happy to meet you. We'll have lunch together and we'll show you our treehouse, and brace yourself because this is a really important thing for you to feel. So the children went up into the treehouse, and the youngest one began to cry because this treehouse did not look like the treehouse in the book. She had dreamed a much better treehouse, and it is an awesome treehouse, but she had dreamed the treehouse in the book. She had seen herself flying on the ropes. Esther and Jerry looked at each other. They said, never again will we invite someone to the treehouse without explaining that it's not the treehouse in their dreams. It's not the treehouse in the book. In other words, the reality didn't come close to lighting up their hearts. Their dream was so much bigger. And so, we could talk on and on and on about the value of dreams and what it brings later, but the point of all of these stories is because we want you to at least be willing to acknowledge that there's happiness for you to have that is not attached to the real treehouse. There's happiness for you to have that's not attached to the real anything. And if you will believe that that happiness is there and reach for it from the power of what you've built into the vortex, which from your point of view is actually an unaccomplished dream for the most part, if you will allow yourself to let that come alive and let it come alive for the purpose of thrilling you, not for any other motive, and you will find yourself thrilled again and again and again with what you have been willing to dream about. What will happen to you for sure is that you will begin to align with the vibration of your inner being, who knows about all possibilities, who knows about nothing being off limits to you. And in that continual alignment, like our friend who was in Cancun, who tasted the energy of our rampages for a while and then allowed things to happen to them that had not happened before. If you will take the pleasure from your dreams that is available to you today, your daydreaming, we're talking about your daydreaming, we're talking about your willingness to just be playful and lighthearted in your mind, what will happen to you is that you will access this energy of your inner being, who knows for sure where you stand vibrationally in relationship to everything you want, and a sequence of ideas will then begin to flow to you that will lead you to the culmination of all things wanted. What we're saying to all of you is that you are big dreamers and big creators, not small thinkers and mediocre creators. And when you approach life from your physical standpoint of moving stuff around, you create so much less than you are capable of, that you begin to believe in your unworthiness, for which you ask for forgiveness. On the other hand, if you're dreaming and allowing yourself to hook in to the dreaming that your inner being has already accomplished on your behalf, then in your full connection, there is no unworthiness. There is no need for forgiveness. There is wholeness and clarity that just leads to one great idea and one great experience after another. This really got into some far-reaching conversation about the power of creation. And it's only possible to have a conversation like this in a gathering where desire is strong and willingness is steady. They've been patient.
I know. Thank you.
They've been willing to stay in the vibration of the thought until it moved into a place of greater understanding. And that's what deliberate creation is. Deliberate creation is taking the bounce from what is, but not looking back at what you bounced from. Deliberate creation is accepting that who you are right now is a byproduct of your culture and your heritage and your family and the way life touched you. And it is you as far as you have allowed yourself to demonstrate. But there's another part of you that you haven't introduced yourself to enough. There's another part of you who exists vibrationally over here in the vortex that is light and free and sure and whole. To the extent that you've allowed yourself to manifest is a small comparison to the part of you that you've not yet allowed yourself to manifest. You following us?
Yes.
What's in your bank account is only what you've let in through your variation of unfocused thoughts. But the vibrational reality and your vibrational escrow contains so much more. And you have ready access to it if you can cling to what is a little less and dream what is a little more. So we're not actually asking you to form the dream. We're asking you to receive the dream. We're saying to you that through life you knew what you didn't want and you launched a rocket about what you did. Every time you touched one end of the stick, you created the other end of the stick. And the other end of the stick is this vibrational reality that we are talking about, that is not just possibility and not only probability, it is absolute ability. In other words, it is for sure, for sure, for sure. If you have lived one end of the stick, you've created the other end of the stick. We just want you to turn your attention from that end of the stick and to this end of the stick, pulling out all the stops and giving you everything we've got in relationship to this. So what that means is that with everything that you've lived, you put a piece of it in your vortex. Everything that you've lived, you put another piece in the vortex. And your inner being has been there receiving it, becoming it, focusing on the whole of what it means, taking the pieces of the dream that you've put there, or the ingredients of the dream that you've been putting there, and seeing it as the whole of the dream that you've created that you can't see, that your inner being can see. So now what we're suggesting is that if you can find one piece of that good feeling dream and use it as your focal point so that you activate, then you'll hook up, zoom, with your inner being who sees the whole thing. And then all manner of ideas and rendezvous and impulses and urges will begin to flow into your experience. And if you've ever had the exhilarating experience of talking with a master of anything, that's the way they describe their life to be. They're in this place, they sometimes call it just an open space, when an idea flows and they can feel the impact of that idea. And when they follow through on it, it's like heaven and earth. It's like everything that exists in the universe becomes a cooperative component, all responding to the action that they are offering with their thought, you see. And so if we were standing in your physical shoes, we would be a little less attentive to the things that have already manifested, because it's old news. It's like gum you've chewed the flavor out of, and would be more attentive to what's in the vortex. And when we catch a glimpse of something that felt particularly good, we would milk it until we were sure that we had identified and isolated the feeling of that. And then we would sit for as long as we can give ourselves permission to do, which we would encourage you to carve out larger and larger times. Do you ever remember just lying in the grass when you were a kid and just letting your mind go? That's what we're talking about, being someplace where somebody won't interrupt you, where from that place of alignment that you know that you've accomplished because you can feel the power of it, you just let your mind take it. You let your mind be the receptacle for the thinking of your own inner being. You let your mind be the thinking, receiving mechanism for the thoughts that the source within you thinks. You let yourself feel and hear and think. You let your mind translate, as Esther's is translating for us right now. These are not Esther's thoughts. These are our thoughts that are moving through Esther's mind, our thoughts that are moving through Esther's mind, and she's finding the physical equivalent words to express for them. And you will find the physical everything equivalent, the urge, the impulse, the feeling. You'll be driving down a street one day and you'll feel like stopping at 7-Eleven, and you won't know why, because you don't like the slushies there, but you're in there because you felt like going in there. and you see something and you think, well, maybe that was it. I did need Kleenex, and maybe that was it. I did want a bottle of water. But then on the way out, you have an impulse to buy that ticket, and when you do, it's a winner, and you recognize it after the fact. What we want you to do is recognize it before the fact. We want you to follow the feeling without the payoff, because the feeling is the payoff.